the farm worker legend for 6 years. He had been the city's most mysterious farm worker. He never talked, never smiled, just worked. The other workers called him the ghost because he silently appeared everywhere. But that day, when armed men came to the farm, his reaction shocked everyone. Within seconds, he had neutralized all 3 of them. "Commando?" whispered his boss. And in that moment, everyone realized that this silent worker was anything but ordinary. Welcome to the Human Stories. Before we continue with this powerful story of hidden warfare expertise, tell me in the comments which city you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, hit that subscribe button. But what happened in those crucial seconds would reveal a truth that had been hidden for 6 years. Henderson family farm stretched across 200 acres of fertile valley land, growing everything from corn and wheat to vegetables that supplied local restaurants. The operation required 12 full-time workers during peak season, men who understood that farming meant long hours, physical labor, and the kind of reliability that kept a family business profitable in an increasingly competitive market. Among those workers, Daniel Cruz was both invisible and indispensable. For 6 years, he had been the man who arrived before dawn, worked until sunset, and somehow managed to be wherever he was needed most without anyone noticing how he got there. But there was something about Daniel that didn't add up. Something that would soon become impossible to ignore. The other workers had given him the nickname the Ghost, not because he was unfriendly, but because he seemed to materialize wherever problems needed solving. Equipment breakdowns, injured livestock, weather emergencies. Daniel would appear with the right tools and the right solution before most people realized there was a problem. What they didn't know was that Daniel's ability to anticipate problems came from training that had nothing to do with agriculture. His physical capabilities exceeded anything the other workers had seen. While they struggled with heavy machinery and long hours, Daniel worked 18-hour days without showing fatigue. He could lift equipment that required 2 men, repair complex machinery by intuition, and navigate the farm's 200 acres in complete darkness without ever getting lost. But it was his awareness that should have been the first clue. Daniel didn't just work, he watched. Always watching. Every vehicle that passed the farm road, every unfamiliar sound, every change in routine. Daniel cataloged it all with the systematic attention of someone trained to identify threats that others couldn't see. The family thought it was just dedication to security. They had no idea it was something far more specialized. And then came the morning that changed everything. October 15th started like any other day. Daniel had arrived at 5:30 a.m., checked the livestock, and was repairing a fence in the north pasture when he heard vehicles approaching the main farmhouse. Not the usual delivery trucks or family visitors. These engines sounded different, harder, more aggressive. But what Daniel saw through his binoculars made his blood freeze. 3 men in dark clothing, moving with tactical precision toward the farmhouse where the Henderson family was having breakfast. They weren't farmers. They weren't salesmen. They carried themselves like professionals, and Daniel's trained eye immediately identified the concealed weapons they were trying to hide. In that instant, 6 years of peaceful farm life disappeared. Daniel Cruz, the quiet worker, was gone. Someone else took his place. Daniel moved across the pasture with speed that defied his apparent age, not running, flowing, using terrain and cover with the unconscious efficiency of someone who had done this before. The other workers, watching from the barn, saw something impossible. Their slow, methodical colleague moving like a predator. What happened next lasted less than 60 seconds, but those 60 seconds revealed everything. The first armed man never saw Daniel coming. One moment he was approaching the farmhouse door, the next he was unconscious on the ground, his weapon secured before he hit the dirt. The second man turned at the sound of his partner falling and found himself facing someone who moved like liquid death. Daniel's hands didn't hesitate, his body remembered every technique, every lesson, every mission. The takedown was textbook, a joint lock that immobilized without killing, pressure points that induced unconsciousness without permanent damage. Professional, precise, terrifying in its efficiency. The third man realized he was facing someone far beyond civilian capability and reached for his concealed pistol, but Daniel was already inside his decision loop. The weapon never cleared its holster. Daniel's strike was surgical, targeting nerve clusters that would paralyze the arm without breaking bones. 3 armed professionals neutralized in 47 seconds by a man they had assumed was just a farm worker. As the last attacker collapsed, the silence that followed was deafening. Henderson emerged from his house, having heard the commotion but not understanding what he was witnessing. His farm worker, quiet, reliable Daniel, stood among 3 unconscious men, showing no signs of exertion, no indication that anything unusual had occurred. "Daniel?" Henderson's voice was barely a whisper. "What? How did you?" But the question Henderson was afraid to ask was the one that would change everything he thought he knew. Daniel looked at his employer with eyes that suddenly seemed completely different, not the mild, patient gaze of a farm worker, but the calculating assessment of someone who had made life-and-death decisions in environments Henderson couldn't imagine. "Call the sheriff," Daniel said quietly. "Tell them you've got 3 men with concealed weapons who were approaching your house with apparent criminal intent." But Henderson couldn't stop staring, because the man standing in front of him wasn't the Daniel he thought he knew. "Who are you?" Henderson whispered. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, looking at the 3 unconscious men, then back at the farmhouse where Henderson's wife and 2 children were watching from the windows. And that's when Daniel made a decision that would expose 6 years of carefully constructed identity. "Someone who came here to forget how to do what I just did," he said finally. Henderson's mind was racing. "Your military, was military. What kind of military neutralizes 3 armed men in under a minute?" The answer Daniel gave changed everything Henderson thought he understood about the quiet man who had worked his farm for 6 years, the kind that doesn't officially exist. But that revelation was just the beginning, because the sheriff's investigation would uncover something even more shocking. When Sheriff Martinez arrived with backup, the 3 unconscious men were identified as members of a criminal organization that had been targeting rural properties for armed robbery. Their plan had been to terrorize the Henderson family into revealing the location of cash reserves that most farming operations kept for equipment purchases and payroll. What they hadn't planned for was encountering someone with Daniel's background. "These are professional criminals," Sheriff Martinez told Henderson after the arrests were completed. "Armed, dangerous, with records of violence. Your worker saved your family's lives today. How did he know they were threats?" Henderson looked at Daniel, who was standing apart from the group, watching the perimeter with the unconscious alertness that Henderson now recognized wasn't farm security. It was something far more specialized. But the sheriff's next question would force Daniel to reveal even more. "Mr. Cruz, I need to ask, your response to this situation shows training that goes beyond civilian self-defense. I'm going to need some background information for my report." Daniel met the sheriff's gaze directly. "Special Forces, 12 years, multiple classified deployments, medical retirement after a training accident that left me looking for work that didn't require security clearances." The words hung in the air like a confession that no one had expected to hear. "You're telling me that for 6 years, I've had a former Special Forces operator working my fields and I never knew it?" Henderson asked. "That was the point," Daniel replied. But Henderson's next question revealed why Daniel's secret had been so carefully guarded. "Why farming? Why hide what you can do?" Daniel looked across the farm where he had spent 6 years learning to sleep without nightmares, to work with his hands instead of weapons, to solve problems through patience instead of violence. His answer revealed the cost of the skills that had just saved the Henderson family. "Because everything I was trained to do was about ending lives efficiently. I wanted to learn how to grow things instead of destroy them." But the day's events had forced Daniel to confront a truth he had been avoiding for 6 years. The skills that made him deadly in combat were the same skills that had protected an innocent family from violence. Maybe there was a way to honor both identities, the warrior he had been and the peaceful man he was trying to become. 3 weeks later, Daniel made a decision that would change not just his life, but the lives of families throughout the region. He began offering security consulting to rural families whose isolated properties made them vulnerable to the kind of criminal activity that had targeted the Hendersons. The work allowed him to use his tactical expertise for protection instead of offense, teaching families how to recognize threats and respond to emergencies without becoming warriors themselves. The quiet farm worker who had wanted to disappear from his military past found a way to honor both the man he had been and the man he was becoming. Henderson kept Daniel as his primary worker but also as an unofficial security advisor, recognizing that having someone with his background provided protection that no alarm system could match. Other farming families in the region quietly made similar arrangements. Daniel never advertised his military background or sought recognition for his specialized knowledge, but he no longer felt the need to completely hide from skills that, used properly, could protect people instead of eliminating them. Sometimes the training that makes someone dangerous in war is exactly what's needed to keep peace in civilian life. The ghost of Henderson Farm had revealed himself to be something far more substantial, a guardian who had found his purpose again. So I ask you, have you ever encountered someone whose capabilities seemed to exceed their circumstances? Someone whose skills suggested backgrounds they preferred to keep hidden? Share their story in the comments, because sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who choose to use their power to protect rather than destroy. Thank you for watching the human stories. If this story moved you, subscribe and help us honor the quiet protectors who carry specialized knowledge into civilian life. And remember, sometimes the most ordinary looking people are capable of the most extraordinary things when the people they care about are threatened.